Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that a storm is coming to Fairmont Crest, not the kind that gathers in weather reports but the kind that gathers in parlors and private text threads, in the hush of backlot corridors and the bright glare of tabloid flashbulbs. The rumor itself arrives like a telegram folded into a fortune cookie. An older, commanding presence is on his way. A performer whose name alone brings an echo of other towns and other dramas to the lips of anyone who remembers daytime television as a map of emotional possibility. He will not arrive to be polite, he will arrive to rearrange furniture and genealogies alike. For a place like Fairmont Crest, where family trees are trimmed and grafted with clinical precision, the arrival of a man like that is invitation and indictment at once. Fairmont Crest is a town that wears its history with a practiced indifference. The facades are freshly painted, the money is old and practiced at hiding its edges, and the Dupree name glides across invitations, philanthropic banners and whispered inventory lists like an elegant watermark. A Dupree wedding is an occasion. A Dupree disagreement is headline material. The family has lived by a set of unspoken rules: public appearances must be flawless, private business must remain private, and nobody, not even the ghosts, should cross the threshold without the proper introduction. That is what makes the rumor about Vaughan's arrival a combustible thing. It threatens to place a stranger inside a house that has never wanted one. The industry grapevine names producers who know how to set a stage, and Michelle Van Gene is one of them, a name that carries steady, pragmatic power. When she allowed the hint that an influential actor would appear in the fall, the town's social feeds behaved like a shaken snow globe. The word influential does not merely mean famous. In Fairmont Crest parlance it means someone who remembers the old scripts, someone whose face can both comfort and complicate. That's why the whisper that veteran soap luminary Vaughan might be stepping through the dunes of this show's narrative feels less like celebrity gossip and more like the first chords of an opera. The casting would not be a cameo. The casting was being sold as an infusion. People said life when they meant disruption. Rumors are hungry and have teeth. Fans and locals began to speculate with the vigor of a storm-drunk wind. Who would this man be? How would he enter the Dupree orbit? The leaks were slippery and tantalizing. Some said he would bring a new son, a secret sibling to tilt a will or reassign a title. Others believed he would be the missing puzzle to a paternity scandal so veteran it would hum like an old refrigerator, a steady, unavoidable noise. The most persistent of the conjectures centered on one name that had always been mouthing its way through rumors: Dante. Dante as patriarch, Dante as prodigal, Dante as the man whose presence would force an entire family to account for the time they had spent pretending certain rooms didn't exist. If Dante turned out to be the figure, then the question everyone had in their pocket was also the one they were too polite to ask at brunch: if Dante is real, is he Leslie's father? Leslie, who carries Dupree blood in museum-grade frames, a posture that has been taught and retaught at an early age, a smile that knows how to soften when cameras approach, a mouth that can hold secrets with the same decorum she uses for candid tea linens. The idea that Dante might be her biological father would rewrite more than a will. It would rewrite memories, the small domestic ones, the intimate exchanges that make up a life when you add them together and mistake them for truth. Leslie does not exist in a vacuum. She is surrounded by people who have learned to read the seams of her expressions the way some can read schedules on a clock. Her friends see when she tenses, when she is rehearsing a response, when she is at risk of being undone by something she had always believed would never happen to her. That is why the message from Peaches lands like a fist wrapped in velvet, gentle in its delivery yet impossible to cushion. Peaches is not a villain, she is a woman with her own gossip, her own grievances, and a compulsion for seeing pattern in the jagged lines of other people's lives. When she arrives at Leslie's door with the kind of apology that smells faintly of perfume and a rumor, Leslie has no idea that the shutters of normalcy are about to be forced open. Peaches' delivery is laced with the tentative, contradictory tones of someone who knows they are detonating something. She speaks of news, not the weather but the human sort, and of Mr. J, a name that lands like a dropped spoon on a quiet table. The words tumble out: birth, claim, confusion. Leslie listens, a slow trapdoor opening beneath the polished floorboards of everything she has been taught to assume. The nature of Peach's phrasing is cryptic and flirtatious with ambiguity. She speaks as if she is reading from a list and is not quite sure which item to underline. The truth, when it arrives, is jagged and private, a revelation that suggests parentage, an accusation that names a man who had thought himself a minor footnote in a history that now seems to be aggressively revising itself. There is something elemental about Leslie's reaction, first the sharp, animal recoiling, a recoil not just from the news itself but from the concept that whole chapters of her life might be annotated incorrectly, and then, in its wake, a curiosity so pointed that it reads like grief. She becomes, for a time, a person enmoored, moving through rooms with hands that do not know the furniture. Her phone becomes a dangerous artifact. She's suddenly attentive to names: Dante, Mr. J. Peaches, the syllables of possibilities. Her sleep phrase. Her friends attempt to anchor her with silly distractions, with power lunches and tactics that have always worked when lifestyles rattle. A spa appointment, a charity gala, the sort of scheduled niceties that are meant to keep people from looking too closely at their own fingernails. None of these tactics help. The only thing that does is the forward momentum of questions. For the Dupree household, which is not merely a residence but an institution, the arrival of Alex Cheek's character, newly cast as the son of Doug and Vanessa, is its own type of seismic event. The family has long maintained a careful choreography. Doug is a man who measures influence like a ledger entry. Vanessa is the matriarch whose smile could both bless a contract and sell a rumor to dealers. Their son is expected to be the organic extension of the lineage, well-bred, impeccably trained in the art of timing, of saying the right things at the right charitable function. Alex's arrival, however, is not simply another polished heir returning to the flock. He carries with him an outsider's perspective, an air of youth that is not entirely domesticated by the Dupree brand. He is a modern echo in a home of classical furniture, the kind who looks at a painting and asks what it hides instead of who it flatters. People notice things about him that the family would prefer be invisible. He arrives with an honesty that is uneven and compelling. He has not yet learned to keep the Dupree brand pristine. He asks questions that the older generation finds uncomfortable. He refuses, with a stubbornness that is more instinct than agenda, to smile on cue. There is a scene early in his introduction when he enters a living room where his parents are holding an informal council. Vanessa is gloved in politeness. Doug is folding his hands into a thesis. Alex leans against a mantel like someone bracing himself before a leap and asks a single, sharp question about an old photograph. Who is the man in the background? The implication that family pictures may have been curated to conceal rather than to reveal produces a silence heavy enough to bruise. That question is a thread. Threads tangle quickly in Fairmont Crest. Before long, Alex's curiosity is parsed as disloyalty. There are text messages that are washed in anxiety, barista whispers, a circle of confidants who convene in safe houses to speculate on what Alex might have meant. He attracts allies, a bartender who likes to keep the real stories of town residents in his pocket, a young reporter who believes she can be the one to write something honest about a place perpetually performing for cameras. He becomes a magnet for those who do not trust the polished surfaces, a troublemaker in a household that prides itself on the art of appearing as if nothing breathes beneath its veneers. The speculation about Dante, about whether he is Leslie's father, grows teeth of its own when augmented by the presence of this new son of Doug and Vanessa. Could these threads be connected? The town enjoys the possibility. Gossip is like a game of pinball. One bump and the ball ricochets against a dozen metal edges. As the narrative machinery warms up, more players arrive. Jacob's name surfaces. He is a man with a particular gravity, a grounding presence whose family has its own quiet history. The rumor mill suggests that Jacob's brother, Isaiah, is expected to make an appearance. Their shared last name rolls through conversations like a drumbeat. Isaiah is spoken about as if he is a missing card in a hand that will determine a bet. Fans who function as a kind of civic jury in Fairmont Crest imagine a collision between Isaiah and Kat, the latter freshly freed from a relationship with Thomas. Kat's breakup has been public enough to be acknowledged at dinner parties but private enough to retain dignity. Her split with Thomas left her raw but resolute. She had given her best and learned through the ache how to close a door. She is not looking for romance. She is not looking for rescue. She is looking, instead, for the kind of solitude that teaches you who you are without the ballast of another heartbeat. And then, as rumors often do, the idea of Isaiah slips into the spaces of her life with the leisurely insouciance of an unticketed breeze. What if she met him by chance? What if their meeting was an accident that would be mistaken for destiny? The town, predictably, prefers a meeting to be mistaken for destiny. In bars and salons people time the moment when two lives might cross, imagining Kat stumbling into an encounter with Isaiah in a place charged with meaning, a bookstore, an art opening, on a wet afternoon under a single umbrella. They want friction and a slow burn that will convince them that the pain of her breakup was the necessary kiln for tenderness. They want the cliché of second chances, rendered with a glossy Dupree sheen. But the story is not interested in giving its townspeople the straightforward comforts they crave. It prefers complexity. Such complexity arrives in small, domestic acts that are easy to misread until they are not. There is a late-night charity auction where the Duprees, as hosts, must present themselves flawlessly. Leslie, still reeling from Peach's revelation, is scheduled to appear on a panel about legacy, an ironic assignment since legacy is the emotional tectonic plate now shifting beneath her. She rehearses not because the speech is difficult but because she fears the way her voice will betray her. Her hands tremble only once, when she notices a man in the crowd whose presence is oddly anachronistic, too composed for the room, too attentive to the way people speak with the curated voices of public relations pros. He looks like someone who has learned to watch masks and tell later what they hide. A rumor like Vaughan's is often accompanied by a physical shadow in a room before the man himself appears, a presence at the periphery, an older gentleman who nods like someone collecting information. He may be the actor's double, his emissary, a friend. People speculate that the first step of Vaughan's entry will be social. A staged encounter, a handshake that looks like happenstance but is engineered by publicists. The Duprees, mindful of optics, plan a carefully choreographed introduction at the auction, a moment that will allow the newcomer, whoever he is, to be anchored into the night without disturbing the table settings. But Fairmont Crest is not all choreographed introductions. It contains animals, secrets that live under porches, under carpets, beneath polite smiles. The man in the crowd at the auction, the one whose eyes study a person as if cataloging evidence, is not introduced formally. He watches Leslie up close, the way a botanist might examine a specimen. When she steps into the light to deliver her talk about legacy, he does not clap with everyone else. He watches, his expression unreadable. Afterwards, in the jostle of wine and leftover canapés, he approaches in a manner that is both old-fashioned and decisive. To the town's advantage, he speaks not with the gentle cadence of a flattery artist but with the blunt, efficient directness of someone who has come to settle accounts. The encounter is short and private and precisely the kind of thing that will be replayed in 100 heads across town. "Ms. Dupree," he says, and there is something clean in the way he pronounces her name, as if the word were an address to be delivered. Leslie, who has spent a life keeping her composure in public, feels for the first time how thin the membrane is between composure and collapse. She replies cautiously, not sure whether he is an emissary of goodwill or an archaeologist set on excavating the bones of her life. He hands her a small card with a single line written in an older, more formal hand, a location and a time. He does not explain. He steps back into the crowd like someone who has closed a book and is waiting to see if anyone will notice. The effect of the card is immediate and tidal. It feels like a dare and a mercy at once. For the Dupree family, the question becomes operational: do they intervene or do they watch? Vanessa, who has always been a strategist, chooses to watch with the unblinking discomfort of a woman who knows how to catalog potential threats. Doug, in private, wonders if this man possesses a right to disrupt the family's narrative, a legal and personal right that might be less simple to extinguish than they would like. For Alex, The card is a confirmation that the questions he has been asking are not idle tabloid fodder but hooks into something real. He wants to know more, not because he is seeking trouble, but because curiosity is the only honest thing left to him. Outside the privileged rooms, in less curated spaces, Jacob receives a message. Isaiah's train is delayed but he will arrive within the week. Jacob's reaction is matter of fact. The brothers have history, and history is the kind of thing that carries both solace and baggage. Jacob's presence is the kind of calm counterpoint that the show needs. He is both a witness and a repository of a past that will prove useful for more than mere exposition. He tells no one of his anticipatory calculation, but he prepares. A brother's return is a kind of calibration. For Kat, who has been lingering in the margins of her own life since ending things with Thomas, the news of another man's arrival is a small, quiet sting. She spends evenings tracing the edges of her wounds, reading novels she would have loved before she knew the shape of human disappointment. In the back of her mind she allows a foolish hope to bud, that the kind of man she deserves might arrive like a rescue, not realizing rescue seldom arrives without contradiction. Back at the Dupree house, the dynamics tighten like a system under pressure. The family meets in the drawing room with its unscuffed banquettes and carefully nonspecific art. They weigh optics and legalities, inheritance and identity. Their conversation is a negotiation that is not honest before itself. They use words like stability and public perception, which are euphemisms for control. They debate whether to accept the stranger's card as an invitation to a conversation that might contain either a welcome or a lawsuit. They do not understand that the choice to speak is itself a kind of danger. Silence will allow rumor to run its course, but speech might invite litigation. In the course of that conversation, lines are drawn not along blood but along loyalty. Who stands where if the house is shaken? Every family has allies and enemies, of course. The Duprees are no exception. Those who wish to see the family's edges fray the town's more honest chroniclers. The people who have been kept at a distance by the family's influence watch closely. They prepare for the kind of spectacle that will make the evening news. They are not the villains. They are simply tired of stories curated for comfort. Alex senses them in the way a new schoolboy senses cliques. He feels both their hunger and their righteousness. He is tempted to perform an act of disclosure, to present the photograph he found, to show the town what the family hides behind its polished face. But for the first time in his life, he pauses. He recognizes that once you throw a stone into a pond, the ripples cannot be called back. Leslie holds the card like a fossil. It is a piece of paper, but it has the heft of possibility. She has been trained to hold herself like a vase of civility, but now she must decide whether to break the form. The man who gave her the card, the man rumor calls Dante, the actor's face a cipher, stands like a punctuation mark in her life. Is he a period, bringing closure? A question mark, bringing doubt? The cards on the table are not merely paper and ink, they are instruments of history. They might shock the Duprees into honesty, or they might be used, with surgical precision, to wound. An eventful evening is scheduled, a quiet dinner where only a handful of the Duprees' closest acquaintances will be present. The function is meant to be mundane, a cheese plate, a few polite toasts, but its proximity to the rumor means it has the intensity of a trial. The night seems to hold its breath. The man, whoever he is rumored to be arriving. Guests whisper of his posture and the way his hands move when he is thinking. They wonder whether his presence will be ceremonial or combative. Of course, not everyone attending knows what the man means. Many think this is merely a dramatic flourish, a temporary disturbance. They are wrong. At the dinner, Leslie walks into the room with a dress that is as much armor as it is clothes. She takes her seat and listens to the hum of voices that have always been smooth. There is an interlude in which Vanessa, with a smile that might be kindly as a scalpel, passes a platter that lands in front of Leslie like a signal. The man Dante, as people already call him in the lull of gossip, approaches. The room narrows. Conversations become a low oceanic pressure, as if everyone is listening to the tide turn. He is older than some expected. His hair carries the kind of salt that marks a life spent between studios and small stages. His face belongs to anyone who knows daytime drama well, A soul that knows how to perform grief and restraint with equal economy. He does not speak at first. He stands in the doorway as if auditioning the space for a moment. Then, with a politeness that smells faintly like apology, he offers a single sentence that is not theatrical and therefore is infinitely more dangerous. "I believe we have a conversation to finish." The words, as simple as they are, carry a ledger's weight. In that instant, Leslie is pulled toward a future she never applied for. The rest of the world, the table, the candles, the polite laughter recedes, and time seems to curate itself into a single, pending choice: walk through the door or walk away. The crowd in the room blinks, like a living audience at the end of a scene where everyone is asked to hold their breath. The card we have seen now seems less like an invitation and more like an incantation. The man takes a step forward, closing the small distance between rumor and reality. People around the table glance at each other. Some are delighted at the unfolding drama, and some are terrified at the prospect of lives being rearranged on a whim. For Leslie, the man's approach is a gravitational summoning. She feels her own center tilt. There is a moment of electric quiet where the story could take any number of shapes. She can stand, she can laugh it off, she can ignore the man as if he were an inconvenience. Or she can answer the summons and invite history to reveal itself, with all the messy, human consequences that revelation carries. She can seek the truth and risk finding something that will not, in any immediate way, make life easier. She can open a door that might offer peace or pain. In the pause before she moves, the room tightens. A calendar in a house that once kept only perfect appointments flexes like a muscle about to break. Then, as if the world cannot hold the suspense for longer, the man clears his throat and says her name again, this time with an inflection that suggests not accusation but a tired hope. "Leslie," he says softly, "may I speak with you?" The question hangs in the air like an unstruck bell. The forks on the table clink. Someone's laughter dies mid-arc. The story, at last, has delivered its most dangerous currency, a choice framed as an offering of truth. Leslie reaches for a napkin. The gesture is small. It is also irrevocable. She breathes, the way someone does before they run, or before they step into cold water. Her hand tightens around the napkin and for a beat the whole house tilts. The man waits with the kind of patience that implies he has come a long way to be patient. Outside, the town's lights hum like an indifferent choir. Inside, the Dupree hearth glows, and someone is about to call a name that will not be easily forgotten. The card quivers in her palm like a small, ancient thing, and then the sound of the front door closing is muffled only for an instant before it becomes the single irrevocable sound of a story beginning to rearrange itself.